Hello, and welcome to the 22nd episode of the Cantina Chatter Podcast. In this episode, I welcome back Brad Jost of the Jurassic Park Podcast to discuss a little Star Wars Rebels. After 4 seasons, Star Wars Rebels has come to an end, and what an ending it was. You'll hear our thoughts on the finale, the characters that had the most growth over the course of the series, and the overall impact that Rebels has had on the entire Star Wars canon. But first, the news. At New York Toy Fair 2018, Hasbro announced the very first HasLab project, the Star Wars The Vintage Collection, Jabba's Sail Barge, the Katana. If you've been following Victoria's Canteen on YouTube, we did a video about it back in February. If you haven't yet seen that, I'll throw a link to the video down in the show notes. The Katana was announced as a crowdfund project for what would become the largest, and honestly maybe even the greatest Star Wars toy ever produced by Hasbro. The catch was that it cost $500 to back the barge, and that it would only go into production if 5,000 units were pre-ordered for a targeted February 2019 release. Well, thankfully, after some nail-biting moments and even a little anxiety on Hasbro's part, the barge achieved its goal. In fact, it received 8,810 supporters. I'm really excited to be receiving a permanent home for all of my Jabba's Palace aliens and skiff guards next year. Not to mention Jabba's band and his dancers, and perhaps even a little room to recreate the scene in which Jabba chokes on his aspirations thanks to a certain princess. Victoria's Cantina backed the barge. Did you? Last month, Toys R Us announced the very sad news that all of its US stores would be closing in 2018. Although some details of the exact timeline are unknown, most locations have already begun closing out their merchandise with store closing signs hanging above the entrances. For decades, Toys R Us has been the biggest American toy store chain, and for the past decade, essentially the last chain of toy stores. It's distressing to be losing a place that so many of us have associated with our childhoods, and let's face it, our adulthoods too. Perhaps your parents took you shopping there as a kid, and now you're taking your own kids there shopping. Or maybe it's just a regular stop on your routine toy run. Whatever the case, the closure of Toys R Us will have a lasting impact not only on the toy and retail industry, but also on our hearts. In recent weeks, fans around the world have been finding new merchandise from Mattel's Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom toy line. After the huge disappointment that was the Hasbro Jurassic World line in 2015, the Mattel line has become one of the most anticipated toy lines in recent memory. Although the street date for Fallen Kingdom merchandise is not until April 16th, more and more fans and collectors have been finding stuff and sharing their photos on social media. In fact, I myself found a couple trays of the $3 mystery bag dinosaurs at Walmart, and just this past week, I located the radio-controlled gyrosphere with Owen Grady at Toys R Us. Remember, the merchandise isn't supposed to be out yet, so don't get discouraged if you haven't found anything. I know that I'm extremely excited for the big April 16th product launch, and I hope you'll tune in for a special launch episode featuring a few friends of the podcast. You may have noticed a commercial for Cantina Chatter making the rounds. I shot and directed the commercial while visiting the beautiful country of New Zealand last month. It features Australian actress and model Olivia Glynn. It was a fun project to put together, so if you haven't seen it yet, be sure to take a look at YouTube or anywhere Victoria's Cantina can be found on social media. Today's guest is no stranger to Cantina Chatter and has been on once before to discuss the infamous Star Wars Rebels episode, Twin Suns. Now, he's back a year later to help me look back on the entirety of Star Wars Rebels' 4 seasons, with a little emphasis placed on the series finale. He's the host of the Jurassic Park Podcast, the finest podcast for all things Jurassic Park out there. Brad Jost, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm very excited to talk about Rebels, something different than Jurassic Park, but this is good, really good stuff. I'm super excited.
Awesome. Glad to have you. So you're a huge fan of Star Wars Rebels, and interestingly, I don't know many people personally who are have followed this show for the last 4 seasons. I mean, I know there's a lot of Rebels fans out there, but like in my online circles and in my daily life, I don't know a whole lot of people, which is kind of a shame because they're missing out, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. I totally get what you're saying there because, even some people that have watched the show have given up on it or a lot of Star Wars fans don't even know about it, or casual fans obviously don't really know about it. But there's a lot here to love, and people are missing out for sure. It has its downfalls here and there, but I think overall it is something that people, whether you're a Star Wars fan or not, should be checking out.
Absolutely. And it's kind of one of those things. I know that when we talked about Twin Suns, you mentioned that if people just followed the films, that really nothing that happens in Clone Wars or in Rebels ultimately, affects the films. It kind of doesn't matter that Anakin had an apprentice or that Obi-Wan and Darth Maul had a rematch, shortly before A New Hope. But for those of us that do follow it and enjoy watching these shows, it really adds quite a bit to the overall mythology and the story and the history of Star Wars. Like, you can kind of tie things in from the films into the shows, and a lot of those things are pretty cool. So I really enjoy having these series out there to watch, whether it's Clone Wars or Rebels or whatever they do next.
Yeah, I've been very excited each and every week, when a new episode's coming out, and even after, maybe a filler episode or something that you would call it, but like, I'm still excited every time to like watch a new one. And now that it's gone, I'm sad, and I'm definitely like, missing that daily dose or weekly dose of Star Wars. It was kind of nice, short-lived, but I guarantee we'll probably get some new stuff sometime soon.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's hard to imagine at this point in time that Disney would neglect all the kid audience that they've tried to reach with the show. And I mean, similarly, I really looked forward to it every week, and the fact that it's gone now is kind of a bummer. But I mean, they are doing so much media these days, whether it's the films or the comics or the novels. I mean, there's just so much to absorb and digest. So I'm sure there's a few things out there that'll keep me busy until they figure out the next animated show.
Oh yeah, it'll be a little while, and we know that shows are coming, so we at least have something to look forward to.
Absolutely. And there's also the live action show that's coming too.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. This is like, I'm like, is this too much? Like, is it possible? But right now I am totally satisfied. I just bring it all. I want it all.
Oh yeah, I totally hear you there. And I actually have like 3 novels that came out over the last year or so I haven't even read. They're just chilling on my bookshelf waiting for some free time.
Yeah, I think I have like an audio book or 2, like just waiting. Like, and they're there. I could listen to them at any time, but there's too many podcasts at the moment, so I don't know.
So, looking at Star Wars Rebels, they kind of pumped these last few episodes out from the last second half of the season. Was it Monday night that it aired? They would do 2 episodes leading up from the midpoint in the season to the finale. What did you think of that structure of them doing, instead of 1 episode each week, they just kind of loaded them up, 2 episodes each week?
I loved it. I gotta say, it was much more enjoyable for me. I don't love the 30-minute aspect of this show. I don't know if there's enough time to like wrap up an epic Star Wars story, because that's what they tried to do a lot of the times, was just have a self-contained episode where they do their thing, that they come into some trouble, they wrap it up, everything's tied in a nice bow. And it's so quick, there's not a lot of room for character development and growth and all that stuff. So I did really like the 2-episode arcs, because they tended to like tie together in a way. It was great. I thought it was a good choice. And moving forward with whatever shows come out, I kind of want to see like at least like that hour long, or whether it's going to be on like some streaming service. Like, maybe don't tie it to a certain time frame, and just kind of make what you make, and make it for the story and not for like a time.
Yeah, totally. I think I kind of agree. Like 22 minutes is, it's not really enough time. But they stacked them, and then it was just kind of over like within a month. So it was really quick.
I know. It was like you watch like the first batch, and then you get to the next week, and you're like, oh, it's over next week. Like, that's it. Like the season finale is next week. Like, it just came back. I'm so confused. But I thought it was a good thing for them to do. I don't know why. I'm trying to like. There's no like time constraints. They didn't have to like adhere to something or come out before a certain thing. Like, so I don't know why. I think they just wanted to burn them so they can like start announcing new projects. I don't know.
So I'd like to do a little bit of a retrospective on what we got out of Star Wars Rebels and its contribution to Star Wars. But first, let's get right into those last few episodes that made up season 4. And there were some pretty packed episodes with a lot of things going on. But when the show came back, immediately following its break in the middle of the season, something pretty big happened in that first episode. It was kind of hard to watch, and it was very sad to watch. Doom. What are your thoughts on what happened in that episode?
Oh, that was definitely sad. I mean, I feel like the writing was kind of on the wall. You kind of assumed that much would happen, and this just happens. Your master like basically has to die. Like, that's just the way that the characters need to develop. And I thought it was done in a great way. He's sacrificed himself. And save the rest of the team so that they could do their thing. And I thought it was like beautifully captured. It was a real nice moment, interesting moment, because like I think like he was like able to see again for like that last moment, which was interesting. But I thought it was well done, definitely sad, and but expected. I don't know.
Yeah, when I saw it, I told my husband about it. I said, Kanan Jarrus is dead. And he's like, what? Because he doesn't watch these shows. and he was just like, I don't understand. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, he's one of the main characters in Star Wars Rebels, and he's dead. And he was like, okay. But, I mean, I was really sad. Like, I was seriously like crying when this happened. Yeah. And I had to go back and rewatch it. I'm like thinking to myself, did this really happen? I knew it was coming. Like you said, the writing was on the wall. I mean, it kind of had to go this way. When you look over the entirety of Star Wars, every master has died. Like episode 1, you had Qui-Gon Jinn. Episode 2, a lot of Jedi died. Episode 3, pretty much the rest of the Jedi other than Yoda and Obi-Wan. And then even the original trilogy, Obi-Wan goes, and then Yoda goes, and then sequel trilogy, Luke Skywalker goes. So it's just kind of one of those things that is part of the story. Everybody has their moment to hopefully do something that makes a difference, and then maybe go out with a bang. And I think that this is one of those instances where the death itself was sad, but it was really rewarding the way that it happened, I would say.
Oh, definitely. And now seeing like the actual finale, and you see what happens at the end there, it's like, oh, it's even more sad. It hits you right then and there. And I feel like, you see this character, he's blind, but like it didn't like affect him whatsoever, which was kind of funny. But like he was just like even better of a Jedi at that point. But he started to finally like accept things, and he was like good, and he was like falling in love, and they were actually showing that for the first time, it felt like. And then they're just going to cut it short. Like, that's it. Sorry, Kanan and Hera. That's it. You don't get what you wanted.
Yeah, pretty brutal, especially for a kids show.
I know, right? Yeah.
But yeah, just the way that they did everything, the way they framed it with the AT-AT walkers like taking their steps, and then it just being silent, like no music. And then I mean, you kind of knew it was coming right then and there. And I mean, it was just really rewarding, though. I mean, the way that he went out, he saved his friends, he saved the team. And he got rewarded by regaining his vision, which I thought was a really cool little touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he knew this was happening. Like he foresaw it, basically. Like he's shaving his head, which was an interesting choice. Like I didn't love his haircut, but that's besides the point. But like, yeah, I mean, he knew it was coming. He knew he had to save them, and it just had to happen. And I think it made Ezra, a better Jedi, or whatever you want to call him at this point. Like, it made him better in his final quest.
Absolutely. I definitely think that Kanan's death impacted what Ezra chose to do in the series finale, for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So as the series went on in the last half of the 4th season, lots of characters started popping up in the series, and this was particularly true of the last couple of episodes. There was Vizago, Hondo, Rex, Gregor, Commander Wolf, and probably several others that I'm missing. But it was really cool to see a lot of these characters come back. Who were you most interested in seeing come back that kind of had their last little moment on the series?
Well, I mean, does it have to be specifically like those last few episodes, or can we expand? Well, I mean, my favorite Star Wars character is Ahsoka, and I just was like so pumped to see her come back to the show in general, because she just left the Clone Wars, like, just disappeared, and that was it. She walked away, and she finally came back. It was like a big epic like comeback, with what do you call it? What was the Fulcrum and everything. And then to see her like, oh my God, we don't know what happened to her. Where'd she go? And then she came back again. It sounds ridiculous explaining it like that, but she's my favorite character, and it was great to see her come back and work with these characters and wonder about her legacy moving forward and all that. Like, so I'm so excited to see, now that we know she lives and everything, like where she goes from there, and maybe who she comes into contact with, and there's so much story to tell after this too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely want to get into that a little bit more, but I completely agree. Seeing Ahsoka in this series completely made sense, especially with Dave Filoni, at the helm of these two awesome series. It just felt right when she came back, and, ultimately, facing her master, facing Darth Vader, and, realizing who he was underneath that mask. It was very dramatic. And I think to this day, that was probably my favorite episode of the entire series.
I think you're right. I think that is probably the best episode. It's just, and now like I don't think I've seen it since the finale or the last few episodes. That would be interesting to go back and watch that, just because of the way it turned out that we know now. But that was such an awesome episode, combined with like so many different things. With Maul and Vader coming in and the fight. Oh my God, it was so good. We can forget about the helicopter lightsabers, but the rest of that episode was pretty good. You
read my mind. I was just going to mention those guys.
Yeah.
So for the season finale of Rebels, it was basically comprised of 2 episodes. There was the first episode where basically everything that happens in the series finale kind of gets set up. The position that the Rebels are in, Thrawn coming back into the fold, Ezra facing all of his, final challenges before he goes. Or I shouldn't say goes, because we don't know exactly where he goes, but he obviously went somewhere.
He's somewhere.
He's somewhere. What did you think of the season finale? I'm talking the last 2 episodes of the series.
I thought it was great. It was the perfect mixture of like storytelling, action, and satisfying conclusions for everybody. Really, I mean, like, I think they did such a good job. There was a ton of work, and like I said, with how short these episodes are, you like look at the clock and you're like, oh my God, like there's only 10 minutes left. How in the world are they going to wrap this up, or how are they going to finish the story? Because we're incredible like super fans that want to know every detail, and I think they did a perfect job at like wrapping this show up, and just like they elevated these last few episodes so much higher than a lot of the previous stuff, because there was some really good episodes in there, but also some like really middling episodes, and these last few were just phenomenal. And like I forget whether it was like the last 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever, but like so much to like analyze and look at. Like the wolves were awesome, like that temple that they found. What episode was that? That might have been like 4 or 3 before the finale. I'm not sure, but there was so much there, and that literally they wrapped up the entire series in like a 3-minute clip at the very end, and it was perfect.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned the wolves, and I just got to mention the wolves real quick too. I love the wolves. I mean, I love dogs, so I think that's why I'm really drawn to anything canine-esque in Star Wars or anything really. But somebody asked me recently, why is it called the Millennium Falcon? Like, are there actually like falcons present in the Star Wars universe? And I said, well, I haven't seen any. And they're like, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, why would they name something after something that doesn't even exist? And I'm like, well, they have wolves. And they have all these other, creatures that are kind of similar to creatures on Earth. I mean, there's the Cantina aliens that look like elephants and look like lizards and, all these other creatures. So, of course, it makes sense that they would have something that, at least resembles a falcon or, has some other sort of meaning within that Star Wars universe. And that's not really here nor there. I just felt like mentioning that.
Well, yeah, I think there's always times where you analyze like the things that they say and you're like, well, that's very earthbound. Like that, whatever they just said seems like something we say here on Earth, but not necessarily out in the stars. Like even in The Last Jedi, people complained about the fact that Holdo said like Godspeed rebels, like because God doesn't exist in Star Wars. But like, I mean, we don't know what they believe in or what they have out in that universe. It's giant. There's aliens. There's space slugs. There's all kinds of weird stuff out there. So there's got to be a Falcon or something like that. And I think like this series in particular, I think it's like the point of this series, I feel like, is to shape the entire universe of Star Wars. And stuff like animals in general were just a huge aspect of this show. And, Ezra's connection to these animals is like something pretty new. I don't feel like we've seen a lot of that before. And just the opening the world with all these different animals like the wolves or the converies or I feel like every planet they went to or they tried to like settle down on, there was always some sort of like weird animal, like those space what do you call them, those like spider things that were like sort of Macquarie designed. But there's so many things in this show that I feel like connect to the outside world, even like the Purgles or what do you call it, Loth cats, or there's just so many things. Like, and I feel like it opened the world for The Last Jedi, where you see porgs and crystal foxes and all those things that were on Octu and all that stuff. It all I feel like it opened the world for this stuff to be okay in Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a really cool observation. And certain things like you mentioned about how Holdo says Godspeed, but there's always been little things in Star Wars. It was in The Empire Strikes Back, I think, that Han Solo said, like, I'll see you in hell. It's like, well, how do they know about hell?
Yeah, true.
And have you seen the deleted scenes to The Last Jedi?
I think I've watched most of them, if not all. I forget.
So one of the things that there's a deleted scene with Luke and Rey. One of the things he says is there's these he calls them pillagers that are going to come to the caretakers village and just kind of like attack them. And he says, well, they come once a month. And then he's like, if you go save them, are you going to be here next month? And this is probably analyzing a little bit too much, but it's kind of he's mentioning a month, which to my knowledge I have never seen a month mentioned in Star Wars before. Which depending on what planet you're on, I'm sure a month is very relative to wherever you're located. But, just little things like that. But it is interesting, and maybe that's a byproduct of there just being so much media for Star Wars out there these days that it's only natural that all these other connections to things that we experience on Earth are tied into the series and to the films.
Yeah, well, at some point it was like only 3 movies, and then they expanded to books and comics and everything, games and TV shows, and now it's I feel like it's hard to contain what you're putting out there. And they have like the story group and as many people as possible, like double checking. But I feel like at some point it's just going to be like, it's fine. Just let that slide. Nobody cares that much. Some people will cry about it. Some people hate The Last Jedi, but we're going to keep going. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I feel sorry for those people. No. So the last couple episodes were really intense in a lot of ways. I mentioned that Thrawn comes back. And, ultimately, I didn't feel like Thrawn was quite as menacing in these last couple episodes as he has been before. And I know that he's always kind of been like more of a cool villain. He's always been a calm villain. And, you never see him like freak out or, lose his anger or his temper or anything like that. I felt like he was a little bit passive in these last couple episodes. Did you feel that way, or is that just something that I'm experiencing?
No, I definitely feel that way. Like I think back to this last batch and I'm like, I really don't even remember him in this show. Like, aside from, some of the cool stuff that they did previously in like season 3 or something, I really don't even remember a lot of his like arc in the second half. And then he shows up in like the finale, which is cool, But I feel like he's like that guy that's just like, oh shucks, every time I can't get them. I tried my best, and I talked really smoothly and really softly, but they got away every single time. Like he just couldn't do it. He couldn't do the thing he was there to sent there to do. And we know Thrawn as this like awesome villain and really calculated guy that just knows how to take down these cells. And at the end of the day, it never really happened too much. There was I don't know what episode it was. I think it was season 3, but like one of the coolest episodes was that like battle, space battle and everything. It was so good. Like one of the best space battles that has ever happened in Star Wars. I think it even like matched Rogue One for me, like that stuff over Scarif. So he's done some really cool stuff, but in the last few, I was just like, whatever. I feel like they just didn't have enough time to flesh out the ending of his character in this sense, I guess, because we know he's not dead at this point.
Right. And we know he's not incompetent. It just kind of felt like you said, they just kind of jam-packed these last couple episodes. Yeah. I mentioned all the cameos. There was a lot of cameos from people or characters that had shown up previously in Rebels, like Hondo. I mean, it was really cool that Hondo came back, because, I mean, Hondo was a big deal in the Clone Wars, and he's had his appearances in Rebels. There was Vizago, who I think was introduced in Rebels. I don't remember him being in anything else previously. And
yeah, I don't think so.
The clones, Gregor, Wolf, Rex. Who am I missing? I know there were quite a few.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt a lot like the Fast and the Furious. Like they had to get like the gang together, and like they needed every one of these guys to like help them through the situation. I thought it was pretty funny like that, but I did love it. Yeah, all those characters. I feel like there was so many more that they could have added, but they're like, all right, we've got like 15 characters on the table here that we have to render and figure out. It's just too much. I think Bo-Katan was there, right? No, I'm sorry, not Bo-Katan. I don't know. There was another like Mando there.
Oh yeah.
What was her name? I forget.
Starts with a K, I think.
I can't remember at the moment. Everybody's like yelling at us right now. They know it. But yeah, and then you throw in the Emperor in there as well. Like he's getting some shout outs towards the end, which was awesome. And you bring back Ahsoka for a few, not much, but yeah, there was a lot to like fit into 40 minutes in this finale and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Ketsu.
Ketsu, yeah. So
just had to look it up.
Yeah, she was been in, I don't know I forget what her whole story is, but yeah, she was in a bunch of episodes previously. I forget when. The show is not that long. We should be easily like remembering what happened.
It's the age. It's catching up with us.
I know, right?
Yeah, she had, as I recall, she was kind of a little bit of, I don't think she was really aligned with like the Empire per se, but she was kind of doing her own thing. And then, as I recall, Sabine kind of like pulled her into the rebellion.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I remember like more of like a bounty hunter-ish kind of person, right?
Yeah, exactly. Old friend of Sabine. Let's go with that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they used most of these characters pretty well in these last couple episodes that they did bring back. And the clones. There was, sadly, one of them lost their life, which was it was Gregor, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And if you think about Gregor, I'm sure, as you recall, he was in the Clone Wars, and he had to face some pretty nasty stuff that really messed with his mind, explaining why he was all kind of bouncy,
a little loopy.
Very loopy in Rebels.
But at the very end, he was not so they just like. I don't know what they were doing, but they just like they retconned the fact that he was like crazy at the very last minute. They're like, well, we got to give him a good send off and not have him seem crazy, which I thought was fine. Like maybe getting shot like opened up his brain a little bit and he wasn't so loopy. But I thought it was definitely sad, seeing that connection. And one of these guys that's like the last of a group of people that were around and everywhere at one point, but now not so much.
Absolutely. And just want to mention the Clone Wars. We don't really know what his fate is. It looks like he dies, and I think that anybody that watches that episode assumes that he dies because there's like a big explosion, as I recall. But then all of a sudden, there he is in Rebels. So it's like, well, he actually survived after all these years. He actually made it. But yeah, there was also Palpatine was introduced here in the finale, and that was kind of interesting. I loved the idea of Ian McDiarmid coming back to voice Palpatine, and when we actually saw him in one of the last episodes of the season, he was just like his full-on Emperor self. It's kind of scary, and he confronted Ezra and Ahsoka in that little, I don't know what you want to call that little force loop place.
Yeah, the time portal, whatever, I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, that very interesting place. And then all of a sudden we see him at the very end, and he's his old Palpatine self that we remember from the prequels. But I had a really hard time with his reappearance. I think just aesthetically he looked a little bit too young. I didn't even feel like he looked like Palpatine from the prequels. He looked maybe like a 40-year-old version of Palpatine. And it kind of threw me off a little bit. I didn't even really quite realize that it was the guy until he started talking. And I'm like, oh, this has got to be Palpatine, which was pretty interesting. So is that just me, or did you feel pretty similar about his aesthetic?
I didn't mind it, actually. I thought it was fine. I can see what you mean. But I feel like a lot of the characters, when they're made into Rebels characters, they don't necessarily look as similar to their counterparts in live action or whatnot. Yeah, I mean, it's just a style aesthetic that they choose. Like Tarkin looks very cartoony, and Saw Gerrera, the choices. Oh, I mean, he's changed though from the Clone Wars to Rogue One, and so yeah, he's a different story altogether. And I don't know. I thought he looked fine though, like for me, and I did like the fact that it was like a play off The Last Jedi in a way, like kind of force projecting himself in a way into that temple or partial temple, and making him like a younger, more pleasing aesthetic, so that Ezra is not as freaked out, when he sees the Emperor,
right.
The Palpatine or Emperor Palpatine, he's just a nice guy, like he's a nice old guy, like don't believe all that stuff you've heard. I thought it was interesting, an interesting play off The Last Jedi in that sense, like comparing Luke, in his force projection to this. So I thought that was cool.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I hadn't even considered that Palpatine could be force projecting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the technicalities of how it was done. I didn't see any like projector, like there was no like droid or anything like following him around.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, he had a hologrammy style to him, right? If I remember correctly. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like maybe that's what was happening, and at least the fact that he projected his younger self, just like Luke did. He was like, that threw me for a loop in The Last Jedi, because I couldn't, like, the first time I saw that movie, I was like, what is happening? Did he get a haircut? Did he just dye his beard? Like, I am so confused at this moment. And then, then you find out later on, the second viewing, I'm like, okay, I get it now. It makes much more sense. And then to see, the Emperor doing the same thing, because he doesn't want to project, his scary self, which Ezra already saw at that point, like, I don't know. Yeah, who was he trying to fool at that point? Because Ezra already saw it in that time loop thingy place. So it was very confusing. But I enjoyed it for the most part.
Now, one thing that was pretty cool is in that whole scene with Palpatine, the Royal Guards came in, and in the original trilogy, even in the prequel trilogy, we never really saw them do anything. But this time, they were kind of had their Crimson Empire comic book look from, back in the day. And it was really cool to see them in action. And for the first time, we're actually able to see what those batons they carry around do. What did you think about that?
Oh, I thought that whole sequence was so awesome. And seeing them actually like get to do something, kind of like, in The Last Jedi, we got to see those, I don't know what they're called, in that throne room scene. It kind of reminded me of that as well. And Ezra just like bringing down that temple and trying to like fend off those guys. It was pretty epic.
So out of all these characters that appeared, one was noticeably absent. AP5. Where was AP5 in all of this?
I don't know. I was actually thinking about that. I was like looking through a list of the characters recently. I'm like, well, what happened to him? Like, where did he go? Wasn't he like floating out in space at one point? Did they get him back after that?
They did, and I think he was on Yavin last we saw him. I think he was doing inventory or something on the Rebel base.
Yeah, I was like wondering that too. I'm like, I get, like I said before, they just only have a certain amount of time, and they couldn't fit that guy in there. I was wondering about Saw Gerrera too. What happened with him? Like, yeah, I forget what the last moment we saw of him was.
I think the last thing we saw of him, if I recall, he was talking to Mon Mothma, wasn't he? And he was like a big hologram or something.
Ah, man, I don't remember.
I think this was kind of when he kind of went off on his own, and he was kind of like, you rebels, aren't going to accomplish anything by being pacifists or something along those lines. And I think that was kind of meant to show us where, he kind of starts, gaining those extremist type views and approaches to doing things. I think that was the last that we saw him, if I recall. And as you noted earlier, there's probably people yelling at me right now and being like, no, he can't. That wasn't his last appearance. But
it's close enough. It's good enough for me.
He had the hair, so I'm pretty sure that was his last appearance.
Yeah.
He was starting to grow out that hair.
Yeah.
So Agent Kallus has had quite an arc in this series. I wanted to get into characters that have had pretty big arcs and quite a bit of character development throughout the Rebel series. So let's talk about Kallus first. Kallus started off, I thought, as a pretty cool character, personally. At the very beginning, I was like, I like the Imperial Navy officers, and he was a little bit different. He was kind of had this armored look to him. He had like the hat and the chest armor and stuff, and he was very brutal at the very beginning of the series. As time went on, obviously, he kind of broke away from that mentality, and I think the biggest thing that kind of changed his perspective was when he was on that one planet with Zeb, and they kind of had to rely on each other to survive. Mm-hmm. And that kind of seems like maybe that was the point at which he started to maybe look at the rebels not as enemies, but maybe just people that maybe felt they were doing the right thing for different reasons than what he was doing. And maybe it just ultimately caught up to his conscience, and ultimately he became the new Fulcrum, as you know. And then he totally went, I'm not going to use the word, but he totally went haywire on the Empire and betrayed them, started aiding the rebels, and finally they got him out of there. And a little bit later, here he is with his long hair, and there's the hashtag Hot Kallus that
Hot Kallus. Yeah. It's true. I mean, look at him. He looked great.
He did. He's kind of like Prince Charming from Shrek.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so quite a bit of an arc for that guy.
I know, right? Yeah, I thought about that character as well. The full development from start to finish. He was a really good bad guy. Like, he was, that guy that, like I said before about Thrawn at times, like, the guy that's just like, oops, they got away again, like that guy. You can't have that guy every time. It gets a little old. And then they flipped it, and he became part of the rebellion, which is awesome. And it's like, he helped do all those things that we saw in the movies and everything. So he's in there in the background somewhere. And his transformation from like rigid Imperial officer with some serious like chops, sideburns and stuff, and that helmet that he had, it was awesome. And then that was a really good episode when he was stuck in that pit or hole or whatever in the ground with Zeb. That was really good and definitely transformed him. And then his ending too. I'm kind of like conflicted because he ended up with Zeb, right, on in their planet. What was it called? Whatever it's called. Leave it to the kids to remember that stuff. Out there in like deep space, somewhere out there with Zeb and all the other creatures out there, and it's like he mass murdered like most of their species, but like it's cool. Don't worry about it. We're gonna go and I'm gonna show you that like you didn't. There's still some left. We're gonna forgive you. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And the two of them, I feel like living happily ever after, the two of those guys. So it's just an interesting turn for that character because, like, on one hand, he essentially created, like, genocide for that species and then is also living with them now in the future.
Yeah, they ended up in a relationship, didn't they?
Yeah, I feel like they're together, right? Like, that's what they're telling us.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of... like jokingly, I kind of thought that was what they were getting at, but when I think about it a little bit more, it's like, yeah, I think maybe that's what they meant.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they didn't say it specifically, but like you can take it for what you want, because I don't think we'll ever see those characters again. You know, they're not like characters that you'll bring back to too often. Maybe. I mean, some of the characters that came back in this, you know, maybe it's possible, but I feel like they're gone. They're off, you know, in their own world or whatever. So I feel like we're not going to see them. So you can expect whatever you want from those characters. And that's the way I think a lot of us are going to take it, you know, that they ended up together, which is a good ending for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's probably what was going on, was that Zeb was just bringing Kallus to introduce to Mom and Dad.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Oh, no, you're really, of all the people in this galaxy, you're with the one guy that tried to exterminate our species.
I know. Like, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to show you this guy killed our entire species, but I love him. You know?
That was good.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
So Kallus had a pretty big arc. Who else would you say had a pretty big character development throughout Rebels?
I guess Ezra. Like, I feel like you have to mention Ezra. And it took a long time. Like, it took too long, to be honest. Like, he was essentially Aladdin. You know, that's essentially what his character was in the beginning. Street rat. I feel like they even said that about him. And just like, he just wanted to save his planet, which he did. I mean, like, so there wasn't a big transformation there. Like, that's what his goal was essentially this whole time. And but like the responsibility aspect and him taking charge and all that, like, really changed his character from, you know, learning about the Jedi and using the Force and learning from Kanan's death and all that stuff, and that connection with all these animals and stuff, touching upon that, which essentially saved their lives in the end. And all of I am just blanking on the name of that planet right now. Lothal. Like, it just like saved all of Lothal just because of this Force connection with these animals and stuff. You know, it was a big transformation, I think. One of the biggest, if not, you know, next to Kallus there, that he transformed probably the most. And this last maybe 2 or 3 episodes, his like skills were insane. Like, he was probably one of the best Jedi you've ever seen. Like, it's crazy. You know, you never saw Luke do any of that stuff. And we always assume like Luke's the best Jedi we've ever seen, but like, which I don't agree with. But Ezra is just like throwing rocks and bringing down temples and jumping like huge gaps. You know, like doing that stuff, reflecting blaster bolts. He's just out of control. Like one of the best Jedi you've ever seen. So he's certainly transformed a ton.
Oh, absolutely. And that was, I think, the one character that people were really waiting on to have this transformation. Because, like you said, early on, he was just a regular kid, a little bit annoying at times, a little bit bratty. Yeah. And even when the rebels were starting to bring him in, he was just kind of like still being a brat. But ultimately, he had this affinity for the Force, and he started receiving training from Kanan, and as time went on, it was kind of like, okay, he's learning the Force a little bit. He's still making brash decisions, like going up against Vader and you know, doing things here and there. But it was definitely season 4 where he finally came into his own and kind of started, you know, breaking away. Because even before that, when he was dealing with the stuff with Darth Maul and trying to trust Darth Maul, and you know, it was just kind of like one of those things where you don't really like align those kind of ideas with, you know, somebody that is seeking to be a Jedi. You know what I mean? Like, he was just trying to trust Darth Maul, and Kanan was like, don't do that. And then Kanan was like, yeah, go ahead and trust him, you know, for a little bit, I think, in that one episode.
Yeah, well, that was interesting because, like, I don't feel like that storyline was fully realized, and
oh, totally,
like him and Maul, like I don't feel like that connection ever, you know, culminated in anything too spectacular. I expected a lot more there, and I don't know, but I feel like he needed that to tap into both like the dark side and the light and all that stuff. So he kind of like needed that to progress. And you know, at the end of the day, he essentially did exactly what Holdo did, you know, in The Last Jedi, by like keeping her plan to herself or to maybe a few people, and then like, you know, not revealing everything, and then at the end of the day, like, she saves everything. That's essentially what he did here. He basically, like, had a plan. He shared it with that one dude, you know, with the spaceships. He's like, oh, this is it. This is the time. We have to do the mission. It's a secret mission, blah, 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 whatever. And then they called the Purgle, essentially. And so they had this, like, you know, insane thing in place that, like, it was like a plan B or something like that. Like, they didn't want to go there, but it was in place. They knew what to do. Ezra had this all figured out. And it really saved the day, and it's all because he hid this plan from everybody, which was exactly what Hulda did.
Yeah, that's a really good observation as well. He definitely kept that under wraps, except for that one guy, and I really couldn't tell you what that guy's name was or why he would have told this guy about it. But it was
Martin Matt. I don't know what his name is. Something along those lines.
Yeah, people are yelling his name right now.
Yeah.
A random Ezra light kid, we'll call him, because I don't really remember his background. Ezra without the Force, let's go with that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's kind of lucky, though, that he did tell him about it, because he's the only one who knew, and when there was I think it was after the wolves came in and took out a lot of those guys.
Oh, such a good scene, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, it was Rook. Rook came in and was going to attack, I think, whoever was left there at that base. And then that's when that kid goes, oh, no, this was Ezra's plan. You know, this was going to happen. He said that would happen. So that was pretty interesting that Ezra would kind of just be okay with Rook coming in and, you know, attacking the base. But, you know, it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. And I just loved, like, the send-off that he had in that they were in that Imperial base, and he's, like, there in the control room with a bunch of the characters all together and sneaks off. Like, I thought it was funny because, like, you know, he's the guy that is like forced to go do this thing, like, Ezra, go climb up in the tunnels, go, you know, do this thing that nobody else wants to do. And he, like, looks up at the grate in the ceiling. He's like, one last time. Like, I'm going to do this one last time, climb up in this thing and save everybody. And, you know, he gave that nice look over to Sabine and, like, said, like, you know, I got this. And she, like, went along with it and distracted Hera and all that. So it was a nice little send-off and a connection between those two. And, yeah, he definitely saved the day in kind of like an unexpected way. I don't necessarily think I would have seen it going that way.
Right. It was definitely pretty heroic. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that he was kind of inspired by what Kanan did, and thought that, you know, perhaps he needed to do a similar act of selflessness in order to save everybody. And ultimately he did. I don't know how exactly he anticipated that the Purga would be coming in, but obviously he did, and luckily he was right about it, because that's kind of what ultimately led to the victory there at Lothal. But yeah, it really did place a nice cap on Ezra's entire growth throughout the series, especially, as I mentioned, throughout the end of the fourth season. He really, you know, grew by leaps and bounds, and it was really nice to see him in a totally different space than we are first introduced to him back in season 1. So he did have a lot of development, and I think it was really rewarding at the very end to see that.
Yeah, I gotta say that Purgle scene was really awesome. Like, I love that. Like, he basically said, like, yo, tune the radio to blah blah blah, and that'll get them. You know, they'll come out and they'll come to this planet, which I guess that's all they needed was some sort of radio signal to call these things. And I feel like that sequence was so beautiful. Like, there was so many awesome, like, really well directed shots in there too, and just, like, beautiful CGI or whatever they're using for the show. It was awesome, and I think they're a unique creature in general, like the way that they have the light speed, I guess, on their tentacles or whatever it is, and just that whole thing that we're gonna pull everybody off of this planet and hyperspeed like off, you know, into unknown regions or wherever they're going. So I thought that was really, really, like, innovative thinking, and like, one way to get rid of several characters that you're wondering, like, oh, what do we do with these guys? And Ezra, you're just like, you know, you're always thinking back to, what was it, Yoda saying, like, the last of the Jedi you are, or whatever. So you're like, oh, there's no Jedi. Like, where's Ezra? you know, where's Kanan? Well, Kanan's dead. Ezra, where's he gonna be? You know, he's or Ahsoka or whatever. All these people. Well, you know, he's off in some unknown regions with Thrawn, and they're having a good old time out there with the Purgle. You know, but I thought it was a really interesting send off for him.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the Purgle, because I wanted to bring those up as well. Last time we spoke about Twin Suns, we were kind of talking about the weird random filler things that happened throughout Rebels up to that point. And one thing that we did mention was the Purgles, kind of probably the most far out like species of animals in Star Wars, because they're basically like these big humpback whales that can travel through hyperspace. So it's interesting that, you know, you think of it at the time as kind of being like, you know, a filler episode or just kind of not really anything that's going to be important to the ultimate ending of the series, but they were absolutely important to the very end of the series.
I know.
It's just kind of wild how that happened.
Yeah, really. That's it's spectacular, and that's what I feel like they've been laying these like Easter eggs like all around for, you know, the continuation of Star Wars, because it can't just be the same thing every time. And I feel like this show in particular, more so than the Clone Wars or anything else really, any of the movies, has laid the groundwork for what we're going to see. And I mean, we know that, you know, in The Last Jedi, they're basically telling us to forget everything that we loved about these movies and this franchise. Like, forget it all. Like, kill it if you have to. And it's going to open up new worlds and all kinds of new stories, and, you know, add these crazy creatures in there. And I feel like we're already seeing that. If you watch the trailer for Solo, there's like some Purgle-like creatures in there that the Falcon's like flying through. Some giant like tentacle thingies. So I feel like they're just opening that world for this new and interesting stuff to be explored. It's really cool.
It is really cool.
I'll go back to that point that you had mentioned. We talked about like Twin Suns and all that, which at that time, I forget how I said it on the episode, but like I didn't love it at first. It took me a while after a few watches to kind of like appreciate it, because I feel like, man, like I said, the show has been laying the groundwork. And the same thing that happened to me while watching The Last Jedi. I didn't necessarily love it on the first viewing. But since I've seen it a few times now, I saw it another time in theaters, and I started to love it after that. And now I have it on DVD. I've watched it several times already, and I definitely love that movie. But like that episode in particular, Twin Suns, really set us up for The Last Jedi. Like, to not expect a giant battle, to not like... just to expect the simpler ways and of the Jedi and all that. And Obi-Wan struck down this incredible villain, Maul, who we've like seen grow to some powerful heights and fall back down, and then claim his throne essentially. And he took him down with one swing of the sword. And that's kind of what we saw in The Last Jedi, is like this like restraint. And I feel like they've been just setting us up for. So I'm like watching these episodes, like, what are they setting us up for next? It's really interesting to think about. Yeah,
that's a great point. I was actually just thinking about that the other day, because I was actually listening to the episode we did, a year ago, and at the time, a lot of people were disappointed about how Obi-Wan just killed Maul like really quick. Everybody expected this really big out battle. And, it's going to be great. It was going to be visually stunning. And then after you watch the episode, it's like, okay.
That's it. One thing, that's it. You're done. Like, you just killed off this awesome dude. And, I mean, like, you come to appreciate the choice and the style of it and what they're referring to. It actually is really awesome.
It is. And, again, like you said, very similar to things that we see in The Last Jedi, like Kylo Ren killing Snoke. Just one, boom, he's done. No duel, no force lightning. That's basically it. And then later when he's confronting Luke, it's the same thing. Their blades never cross because Luke's obviously not there. But it's just a very simple fight. Not really a whole lot to it. It's like two moves. It makes up the whole duel, basically. If you don't count all the blaster fighting in it.
I know. I don't. And there's no lightsabers that touch in that movie, is there? Like, there's no like actual lightsaber battle.
Nope. No, there's not. I think it's the only Star Wars movie where we don't. Well, no, Rogue One. Rogue One's. I don't know if you can. I guess you could count Rogue One, but yeah, same idea. Yeah, of the Saga films, you don't see any movie other than The Last Jedi where there's two blades that don't meet, which is very interesting. But ultimately, I kind of feel like that's to the benefit of the film. At first, I was a little disappointed that we didn't get that. But as time has gone on and I've seen the film a couple more times, I kind of like that it is different in all these different ways.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate it. I kind of wish they weren't abandoning like the Skywalker lineage in a way, but you know, it is what it is, and you gotta change your thought process. That's what happened. You know, I had to change my thought process as to what Obi-Wan and Maul were gonna do. You know, I thought like you said, it was gonna be a crazy, awesome battle, and it wasn't the way. And the same thing with Luke and Kylo. Like I expected Luke to go out there after he just got shot 1 billion times by the walkers, like to just decimate them, and then it never happened. And you just have to like, you know, change your way of thinking. That's what these movies and this TV show are trying to tell us.
Right, completely. And that's a great thing. I mean, even in like education, you know, there's always these concepts that are introduced about keep building on what you know, but also approach it from different angles. Think about things from different ways and how you can arrive at new conclusions. I think it's more of an interdisciplinary method. And I think that's kind of what they're kind of going with in Last Jedi and in Rebels. They're kind of bringing in these new elements that, you know, have always kind of been there. We just haven't heard about them necessarily. And I think that it's great. I think it keeps things fresh. I think it gives us more story rather than, more of the same. And it just keeps things interesting. So I do appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
So other than Ezra and Kallus, I would also say that Sabine had a little bit of character growth as well. Maybe not to the same extent as some of these other characters, but she did come a long way, obviously. When we first meet her, she's already with the Rebels crew, but she kind of goes on her own little personal journey over seasons 3 and then the beginning of season 4, where she's kind of finding her place within the Mandalorian family that she's a part of. I thought that was a pretty interesting dynamic to add to the show, because we do see the Mandalorians in the Clone Wars. We get a little bit of background on them, but we don't really follow like a hero type character that is a Mandalorian in Star Wars, like period, other than Sabine. So what are your thoughts on that, on her growth?
Well, I think she's an interesting character because I, for one, feel like she was fully formed, you know, in the first season. Like she's a pretty established character. She's got like near like Jedi skills at the very beginning. Like she's doing some crazy moves and jumps and doing all kinds of awesome stuff like that. And you learn a lot about her. You learn that she was, you know, part of the Imperial group and all that. And she essentially was like a crazy weapons manufacturer or designer or something like that. I'm like, I don't know if I buy that, like, necessarily. I feel like she's super young, but I don't know, maybe she can do that. But I kind of like took me out of it for a bit. I'm like, well, this is very interesting. I feel like it was like a plot point. We just need to cover this. Like we need somebody to relate to. So let's make her the one that is responsible for this weapon and all that. I don't know. I didn't really love that stuff. And to be honest, I don't really love a lot of the Mandalorian stuff. I could just leave it, you know, to be honest. I don't really care for it that much. And I think it stems from the fact that I really just don't care about, what's his name? You know, the original one. Shows how much I can remember at this moment. What's his name? Come on.
Previsla?
No, literally the bounty hunter, Boba Fett.
Oh my goodness.
Like I just don't like care about him, to be honest. I know he's like some people's like favorite character, but he didn't do anything.
He's not really a character.
I know, he's nothing. Like he just came in and people like, you know, I think because of the toys and all that, people set him up to be like a bigger character than he actually is, and he literally does nothing except die. Like I guess he's responsible for Han Solo getting captured, blah blah blah, whatever. But like, I don't know. I just didn't love the Mandalorian stuff too much, and I thought it was good. Like it was good, really good directed stuff. It was beautifully shot. Like it looked awesome visually. I just didn't love it. I feel like it was a distraction from the plot line here. And I think that's one of the downfalls of the show is it didn't necessarily know what it wanted to be. I feel like Filoni just kind of wanted to hit all these things, like, because he didn't have enough time on Clone Wars, even though that went for like, 6 seasons. He wanted to wrap up a lot of stuff. He wanted to do all this and that because they did the Mandalorian stuff in Clone Wars, but you know, he didn't get to revisit it, so he wanted to close it out. So he closed it out here and brought back a lot of his characters and all that stuff. So I feel like not very focused in that sense, where it wanted to rescue Lothal, but then it also wanted to go out into space and start a rebellion. I mean, the show's called Rebels, so we're kind of expecting it to be about the formation of the rebellion and all that, but like that necessarily didn't exactly happen the way we thought it would. And then they're like off on Mandalore, like trying, or wherever, and trying to like, you know, save the throne of that planet, and it was like all over the place for me, and I didn't necessarily love that thread, but I do like Sabine as a character. I think she's really cool, and her jetpack's awesome, and especially in this this last like episode or so, like she was like destroying like stormtroopers left and right. It was really awesome, and I think she grew up a lot, and she learned off of Ezra, and you know, look at what she did with Lothal. Like she was basically entrusted with that planet, and which is interesting because she just saved like Mandalore essentially, and like handed over the black saber or whatever, and then just went and like lived on Lothal the rest of her life. So she really created a great place because it looks beautiful now. There's like a nice ocean side. It's a huge like you know, like a Oz like city now. It's crazy. But I do like her as a character. I don't necessarily love the storylines that they went down with her, but she is pretty cool. And I hope they go down some more storylines, by the way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, she probably introduced some sort of an act for global warming. I think that's probably what happened.
I don't know if you were, you know, surprised by the relationship of Kanan and Hera. I mean, I kind of saw it coming, and a lot of people knew it was happening, but like it was kind of a surprise for some at the end, literally like the last few moments of the movie, the show, when like there's a kid there, and you're like, oh my god, it's Kanan's son. Like, when did this happen? But like, so that was like an interesting revelation, at least.
Absolutely. After I watched it, the episode, I kind of had to rewind and just look at those last few moments where she Sabine kind of recaps what happened at the very end of, I guess, the Galactic Civil War. And that was interesting because, I mean, apparently in the old expanded universe, there were aspects of, you know, different species being able to procreate. Rebels, you know, being a kids show isn't really a place that you anticipate something like that coming up or being a topic, but it actually happens. So I do think that's definitely worth mentioning. That was pretty interesting. I did not see that coming at all. Not just because, you know, Kanan's dead and he has a son, but to me, what really stood out was that they're two completely different species, but they had a kid.
Yeah, you're like, well, you didn't think about it at first. You're like, oh, cool, they had a kid. Wait, how did that happen? Exactly. Oh, I guess those work. They work. Okay, it works together, I guess.
Yeah, it's yeah, I haven't really heard a whole lot of people complaining about that, but it is something I still think about for some reason. I'm kind of like, how? I mean, yeah. Without having to get into it too much. I mean, obviously it happened. It did.
And I don't necessarily love his design, though, on that character.
Oh, he looks like a leprechaun.
It's a little weird. Like, I mean, it got me in that moment. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Very cool. But I'm also like, hey, he's really creepy looking. Like,
he is. He looks like a leprechaun, I'm telling you.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, too weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I like the way that it ended. I think that having, you know, kind of showing what happens after, you know, the end of the episode is a pretty cool way to do it. I mean, it kind of gives the series a little bit more closure, gives it a little bit more of a sense of, okay, you know, I grew to care about some of these characters. This is where their story went. And it was nice. You know, they mentioned that Captain Rex was on Endor, which I think that's something that Dave Filoni has kind of been like, you know, pushing for a while now, it seems like. And you know who I'm referring to, right? Like the old guy that shows up during the battle.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I guess that kind of confirms that it was him, because why else would they even mention that if it wasn't? And let's see what else happened during that time. Obviously, Ahsoka came back, And
Yeah. So good. I know. I saw that ship flying in. I'm like, oh, come on, that's Ahsoka's ship. Like, that's her ship, right? I mean, it looks like it kind of looked like the design on her head and all that stuff. So I'm like, that's got to be her ship, and it was. And I was like, so happy. Oh, so great.
which kind of makes you wonder, like, how long was she on that planet?
Oh, I don't like. What was the name of that planet? Do you remember?
No,
I don't know.
Morban? No.
Morban?
Morban?
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
I think it was.
Okay.
I think that was it. Hey, if it wasn't, oh well. But I don't know. I was really wondering that as well. Was there any like ships left over from like any of those like Inquisitor-y people, or
I think
Maul took his ship, and I don't know,
Yeah.
but I have no idea how she got out of there. Whether I feel like I heard people saying she found another portal, like in one of those like time portal-y things. But I don't know.
that could be interesting. I assume that she went back to where she came out of, since we do see her at the end of that episode where she's dueling with Vader for a brief moment. I assume that was after the portal. But
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's like, did she stay there for 5 years and, she just barely now got off? Probably not, but it is interesting to ponder, the technicalities of how she escaped. But, that happens a lot in Star Wars, so probably shouldn't dwell on that too much.
But she was at least out there all through the original trilogy, and because this essentially catches us up. I forget what the time frame was exactly after Endor, but it was not too long, right? It was like somewhat near Endor. So she's been out there this whole time. Like, where and what has she been doing? Has she come across Luke or any of the other people? Like, I just want to know that so bad because she's my favorite character. I don't know why. I love the character design. I love like the dual sabers. But seeing her come back at the end was super awesome. Even though it was just like 30 seconds or probably less. Just knowing that there's more story to be told really opened it up for me, and I'm super excited about that. That was one of my favorite aspects of this finale moment.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been having my own little time with the Clone Wars lately. It's the 10th anniversary of the Clone Wars, so I've been in the process of, rewatching the entire series. And I'm having to jump around because I'm doing it in chronological order, which, they didn't air in chronological order. So it is interesting to go back and look at Ahsoka in season 1 of the Clone Wars, and then, seeing her in the finale of Rebels, and, just kind of analyzing how far she's come, and, everything that she's been through. And the fact that, like you say, she was there during the original trilogy, even though we didn't see her. And she's still alive. So, I mean, it's really leaving the door open to some pretty cool possibilities. And I hope we get to see some of those in the future.
Yeah, I feel like she's this character that is just tied to everything. Like, I would not be surprised if she's eventually tied to the sequel trilogy characters in some way, because she's tied to Anakin and everybody from the prequels. Now she's like tied to the era of like the original trilogy. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like she's going to be tied to everything. She's like this character that just comes and goes. And I love like all her stories. I read her book. Ahsoka wrote a really nice book. It was good. And then, where they're going to go from here, I am so pumped. Like, I want to see the adventures of like Ahsoka and Sabine, like going out there, tracking out, Ezra's location and finding Thrawn, all that stuff. I want to see that so bad.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really cool if they wanted to do like if Disney XD maybe wanted to do in a year or a couple years, maybe like a feature film or something, a mini series. It'd be even better maybe if they wanted to do it in live action, and we actually get to see Ahsoka in live action for the first time. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, and I'm hoping that I love the character as well. I'm really hoping that somehow or another, we get to continue her story and see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm positive. I feel like that has to be the next step, right? They have to focus on those two characters going out to find Ezra and Thrawn, because, I mean, Thrawn's like a big character. You're not going to leave him out there and just forget about him, are you? Like, I mean, he's got another book coming out tied to Vader and all that. So I don't know when that takes place. I'm assuming like in between all this stuff that's happened already on Rebels. So that'll be interesting to read. But I don't know. I feel like you can't leave those characters out there. I feel like you just showed them going for the first time, like I'm assuming the first time, to go find Ezra. And I feel like this has to be seen, whether it's animated or live action. I don't know, but Filoni's got to be involved, right? It would be nice to see him take a step into like live action or something like that, but I just don't know how the character would come across. I would love to see it in live action, but I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, it definitely could be. And I mean, there's got to be a reason for the fact that Thrawn was with Ezra. I mean, he's not really neither of them are throwaway characters. Obviously, they're both. Ezra's maybe the main character in the series, if you want to break it down to one character. And Thrawn is a very major villain who has a huge fan following and has since, I think, the early 90s when they released the Thrawn trilogy novels. So, I mean, you got to think that there's some, targeted aspect of the characterization of these two characters that they're trying to move towards, and it'll just be interesting to see if they follow up with that, and if they do, what their goals are for the characters, because I mean, they're still out there, and you just got to think that there's something that's going to have to come along the way, whether it's a show or a novel, something or other.
Yeah, give it to Rian Johnson. He's going to do something, right? He's doing like 3 more movies or something. Just give it to him. Like, I want to see him tackle it. That'd be awesome. Or if it's a book, I don't care. I just want to find out what's going on. Like, just give me more of Ahsoka. That's all.
Well, we all know that Ezra comes back as Snoke, and happens.
Yeah. I mean, hey, they're both from the unknown regions or something, right? Like, isn't that what where Snoke's from? So, I think that's where they're going, right?
So, what would you say, Brad, is the overall impact of Star Wars Rebels on the Star Wars saga, the Star Wars mythology, everything that we've come to know? Between the films, the novels, the games, and so forth, what is the biggest impact that you would say this show has had on Star Wars?
Well, I like I said, I feel like the story maybe not too much, to be honest, because overall it turns out this show was literally just about saving Lothal, like just generally speaking, I guess. There was certainly a lot of other stuff that happened in there in between. But we all expected this to be about the growth of the rebellion, but like that never happened, like I said, but it was all about Lothal. So I feel like that's probably not going to play out too much. Like that's not going to have much of an impact. But like I said earlier, like the impact for me or probably for everybody should be that they're telling us what we're going to see and all that. And they're kind of like just paving new ground for us. And I don't know, like maybe stuff like the time portal place or whatever will come into play somehow. I mean, we saw the temple that was a part of be destroyed, but I would assume there's other ways to get, maybe not that one, or maybe there's another, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see if that ever comes into play and somehow in the future, because they literally just established time travel of a sort, I guess, right? You can essentially pull people out of time or jump in and out of different places in the universe, and it was cool to hear like people from the prequels, the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, like you heard like Rey and Kylo in there, and so many other characters throughout the saga. So that to me is like a big question, as like how much impact will that have? I don't really know. But as far as everything else, I feel like they're just laying the groundwork, like I said, with the connection to these weird space creatures and not expecting giant battles and different stuff like that. I feel like that's all set in stone here, and will expand upon this in the entire saga somehow.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting when you think about where the show started. Like you said, they kind of painted the series to seem like it was going to be about how the characters started the rebellion, the Rebel Alliance, and over time there are inklings of that. They kind of talk about there's a rebellion now, but I think I don't remember if it's season 2 or 3, but all of a sudden you see like Hera piloting like an A-wing or something, or a B-wing, and she's leading all these different fighters. It's like, oh, where did these guys come from? So it seems like they maybe started off kind of trying to show the origins of the rebellion, and I guess in some ways they kind of did, but it seems like the story of these characters was kind of coinciding alongside other things that were going on within the rebellion, other people that were having hands in it, like Mon Mothma and, you know, all the other vehicles that would appear. You know, they had to come from somewhere. So it seems like they were kind of trying to maybe merge the stories together. So, I mean, it's really interesting how it ended up ultimately being mostly about Lothal. It ended exactly where it started. And I think that was one of the bigger complaints, too, is that people were saying, like, why are they always on Lothal? Why are they always on these same planets? When are they going to go to Coruscant? When are they going to go to Tatooine? Well, they did go to Tatooine, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
But it is interesting. I mean, just the way that it started out. And I kind of feel like, you kind of alluded to, maybe they were kind of making it up along the way. I kind of got that sense as well. But I kind of liked, ultimately, how it didn't branch off, you know, too much, even though they did manage to introduce a bunch of weird characters and creatures and aspects of the story, like the time warp or force loop or whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, I mean, it started off on one note and it ended kind of like back where it started. I kind of like that dynamic because it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to hear the list, like you mentioned with the Clone Wars, like the essential list or the list in order, kind of like streamlining this series in a way to kind of cut out the fat a little bit and just like stick to maybe just the story of Lothal. You know, like I want to see maybe just that or, you know, some of the other stuff. But it would be interesting to kind of see how it works out that way, because it seems to be just about Ezra and Lothal. Like eventually, that's what it all came out to. And yeah, the rebellion stuff was like tied in here and there. Like it seemed like every now and then they're like, oh, it's happening. This is going to be it. They're really going to join in and they're going to build something bigger. And it just never like paid off that way, but we did see them help at least. You know, they tried to help to get a lot of these ships, the Y-wings, I think, right, and the B-wing, all this stuff. Like they tried to help to get this stuff, and then eventually, like the rebellion's just like, sorry, we're not gonna help you. You know, you're on your own. And so it was kind of like, it was interesting, you know, to see it play out that way. And they tried, you know, they really tried to get this rebellion started, and then. What was that big space battle over Lothal? I forget. I'm trying to remember back. I think it was where Thrawn came in with like all the ships and what's that one guy? The one rebellion guy. He like crashed his ship into like essentially just Rogue One. So all that stuff it played out so well, and I think that was all over Lothal, if I'm remembering correctly. But
yeah, I think so.
So they basically like cut their ties after that, and they're like, "Wow, you guys are ruining our chances at a rebellion here. So we're gonna do our own thing and you know not really help you out too much." So it was like you kind of saw the dark side of the rebellion, which we saw built in Rogue One. You know, we saw that they're not necessarily like the greatest group of people, but they were very like straight edged and clean like in the series, and I didn't necessarily love a lot of the designs on the rebels and all that stuff. You know, it showed that they didn't have the budget on this show when you just see like a bunch of rebel pilots like with their masks or their helmets like down halfway across their face where you can't even see them. Same thing with a lot of the Imperial people, but yeah, I guess they just didn't have probably the budget to do the rebellion stuff as much as they wanted to.
Right. Commander Sada, is that who you're referring to?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I have to look up some of these people. These names are kind of fleeting sometimes.
I know. Yeah. It's sometimes it is difficult, I will say, like to remember stuff on the spot when you're recording versus like just talking in person or just thinking about it. Like, so it definitely helps to be recording and forget things.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. I think that the overall, the biggest impact that, for me at least, Rebels is going to have on the whole Star Wars story is kind of what we've been talking about. It's introduced all these really weird and different aspects to the Star Wars like mythos that we haven't heard about before. You have like the Purrgil. I mean, like I said, I think that was probably the most far out craziest thing. Yeah. But then you also have things like Bendu, who was pretty out there as well.
Oh, yeah, true.
And then things like the Force loop or I like calling it Force Loop. I don't know what the technical term for it is, but
sounds good to me.
But I mean, things like that for me are kind of what really, like I said earlier, grow the story and keep it interesting and make me want to know, how did this tie into that? Or, what connections am I making between this and this other story that happened in the future? And I think that's really the best thing about Dave Filoni being in charge of this series is that, and the Clone Wars, is that I think he's a storytelling genius. Like, I think if there was one person that you could say, this is the true, person, this is the one person that is a successor of sorts to George Lucas, it would have to be Filoni. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, they worked so closely together on the Clone Wars, and
yeah,
he should be like the heir to the series here. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I feel like Rian Johnson's getting a lot of credit now, but Filoni, he has done so much work and really tied so much together, and it's beautiful, the work he's done.
Absolutely. He really has a good handle on the mythology of Star Wars. He really understands it, and he's not afraid to push the boundaries a little bit, as we've seen, not only in the Clone Wars, but also in Rebels as well, with all these different and intriguing elements. So I've absolutely loved the stuff that he's done with it, and I really hope that we get a lot more from him in the future. I mean, obviously he's still at Lucasfilm, so if he's not going to do an animated series, I mean, I agree. I'd absolutely love to see him branch out into feature film, or have his own, maybe a spin-off of something. I think if they were going to have one person to as we were talking about, maybe a film where you go with Ahsoka and Sabine to find Ezra, I mean, it would have to be Filoni that directs it, I think.
I would think, yeah. I mean, I don't know how well he does live action or not, but I'd certainly be welcome to have him do it.
Or at least tell the story.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, yeah. He'd have to. I mean, it's his characters, it's his babies. Like, he just has to have these characters all show up. Like, we talked about all the cameos and whatnot. It's like they were his characters, so he's not going to let them go.
Absolutely. So one last thing I wanted to ask you before we end up here. Out of all of the cameos that happened in Star Wars Rebels from other aspects of the saga, there was C-3PO, R2-D2, Bail Organa, Princess Leia, Lando Calrissian. We mentioned Saw Gerrera and Mon Mothma, Palpatine, and probably several more that I'm missing off the top of my head. What would you say was your favorite cameo?
Well, aside from Ahsoka, since she was my favorite character, and she was more of like a character than a cameo. That's tough. I mean, Lando had some fun moments. I always forget that he was a part of this. And he voiced himself there. Well, whatever. Billy D voiced him. I think Maul could we categorize him
as a cameo?
He's a little bit bigger, I guess, than a cameo. Oh man, this is tough.
I guess we could say Ben Kenobi would have been a cameo, right? He just showed up in one episode.
True. Yeah. But yeah, I didn't. Like I said, I didn't love that episode, so it's hard to say that I would pick him as my favorite. And I didn't love the R2-3PO stuff. That was like the second episode or something.
Yeah, and they were on the Star Tours vehicle.
I did. Oh, you know what? I'll pick Rex. Wasn't he? Not Captain Rex, but from Star Tours. Yeah.
He was in
that episode. And I think he came back to voice him too, right?
Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens, yeah. So that's what I'm going with, because that's like a super out there cameo that not a lot of people are expecting. So I'm gonna pick him because that was awesome.
That's perfect. Now that you bring that up, I have to go with that too. I think that was it's just so out of left field. Pee Wee Herman, I love it.
I love Star Tours, and he's not on the attraction anymore, right? He's in the queue, I think.
He's in the queue, yeah. He kind of turns on every once in a while and kind of blows up again.
Yeah, I'd prefer him, taking the lead over 3PO or whatever. Yeah, I'll pick him. That'd be nice.
Awesome. Well, anything else you can think of that we should mention about Rebels? Or
oh man,
there's a lot.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like I said, I'm really interested to see how this time travel thingy plays out. because they could have killed it off. I don't know if that's what their intention was, but I'm really interested to see where that goes.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of seems like we know that Palpatine was after that, so it seems to me like it's one of those things where whoever is able to control that basically controls everything, right? Because you're able to control the past, the future. You're able to control basically I don't want to say the Force itself, but all of these possible outcomes. I mean, you're basically, you would have them at your disposal. So it kind of seems like a big deal if you're able to control that, which since that temple is just kind of destroyed, I don't know if they could still do that. I don't know.
I don't really know. I mean, I guess it was, it's hard to say. I mean, was it contained to just that temple? I don't know.
Right, I don't know.
I have no idea because there were so many portals all over the place, and I feel like this has been like calling out to Ezra for a while. We've seen him before, like in like a space, like just on his own kind of thing, because that was like, it was like he was just walking on a platform in space. It was like weird. But and the whole like Mortis, aspect of it all, we saw that come into play. Not necessarily time travel or anything, but like the Mortis stuff in the Clone Wars, and then here again, there's a tie to it here with this temple. So if Filoni's ever doing anything in the future, I would expect somehow that the Mortis stuff comes into play again. This time travel stuff, I don't know if there's another aspect of it, reaching that temple again or finding another portal. I don't know. I have no idea. But and it's just wormhole. Like you opened up this thread that like could change the entire saga. Like I don't know if in a good way or not, because you could like ruin everything with it. But luckily they didn't. They just like subtly changed one thing, and we don't even know if that's how it would have played out. When he reached through and grabbed Ahsoka, I don't know. I mean, at that moment, she cracked the ground under Vader, so she wasn't going to, like, die from Vader, right? Like, that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And because he fell through the ground, like, I guess the temple maybe would have crushed her. I don't know. I mean, we can't really say for sure whether she would have died in that moment, I guess, right? So whether he saved her or not, I don't know, but maybe he just, delayed the inevitable, or I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's sensitive, because it could ruin everything if you just let somebody, take care of it. If Palpatine got a hold of it, or Snoke, or whoever, would have been searching for it, it could have ruined everything, but we don't know for sure.
Right. I mean, there's so many ways that could go with that. If they wanted to kind of just leave it as is for people to continue to think about and talk about, I could see them doing that. But if they wanted to explore that a little bit more, I could also see them doing that as well, because there's, a lot of possibilities with that could, happen. You change the past, you change the future. If you change something, how does it affect, the present? I mean, it's just one of those, it's kind of like Back to the Future type stuff. It's like, you can't change one thing without it affecting everything else. So
yeah, it's dangerous. Like that's what it is. And I don't know. I mean, it's kind of too big of a thing to just like let it go, right? I mean, like it was it's such a big deal, like what they discovered there. So I don't know if you can just let that go or not talk about it ever again. I don't know if they'll ever touch upon it in the movies, because that might be a lot to explain in 2 hours. But I guess they did it in 30 minutes or whatever, but I don't know. So I feel like we have to see it eventually somehow, but that might be a lasting impact on Rebels that we have yet to see, but I don't know.
To kind of expand on Rebels as a whole a little bit, we didn't really get a whole lot. I don't know how closely you follow the merchandise from that we've gone from Rebels, but there haven't really been a whole lot of action figures in any of the lines or vehicles compared to Clone Wars, where there was a ridiculous amount of product by comparison. So that's another thing it's a little more of a personal thing, but that I would like to see is, more merchandise. I don't know how much they're going to get into it at this point, because the series is over. I don't really expect anything, but I kind of feel like they dropped the ball a little bit and really didn't do quite as much as they should have.
There was a few like 3 3/4 stuff, right? Like, because I have Ahsoka, I have like I think it was like a 2-pack of Ahsoka and Vader. So I got them. I have Ezra and like a little speeder. But yeah, I don't think I got anything else. But those are, the 3 3/4 stuff. I kind of really don't like collecting that, to be honest, because I feel like it's not worth it. It's just so small, and it's not always painted great. But I haven't found, I like to try to find stuff like in person. I haven't really found much. Like you said, it's been kind of barren out there. But I really want anything Ahsoka, so give me all that stuff. But yeah, I haven't seen too much else. Was there a chopper? I feel like there was a chopper out there.
There's a, it was just by itself. And then later I think they repacked it with Zeb during the Force Awakens line. And even further, Disney parks, they have their own, I'm not sure if you've seen, but their own line of droids. They're 3 3/4 inch scale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they did a chopper there, and it's an excellent figure. It has a removable wheel for the bottom. It's got his arms. It's an astoundingly good figure, and it's just kind of crazy that Disney parks can do a better figure than Hasbro in some respects.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I didn't get a ton of that stuff either, and I don't know. I just want some more Ahsoka. That's all I care about.
You have the 6-inch Ahsoka, I assume.
I don't. No.
Ooh.
Oh, and you know what? Some of the good stuff I've seen out recently is that Forces of Destiny stuff, and there's a lot of ties to like Rebels in there as well.
Oh yeah.
So like the Sabine figure, I feel like I see that thing all over the place. And that might be another outlet too, where we see a lot of these stories play out. Like Hera stuff could play out there on Forces of Destiny. So yeah, that'll be a good place to look out for, because they have tied a lot of characters together. Like Hera they showed a lot of her stuff on Endor and all that. So yeah, I'm really interested to see that aspect of it, because yeah, that's great. I haven't caught up on all the new episodes. There's been a bunch of them released recently. I saw a few of them, but not all of them.
Yeah, I don't like how they do the mass release with Forces of Destiny. I kind of would prefer if they just maybe did like one a day or something. But
yeah, it would be easier to keep track of. I'll have to go down their Twitter one day or not Twitter, their YouTube. That's where videos are, and just check it out, because I'm lost. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff on there too. It's so short, but it's fun. Definitely,
and I think that's the one thing we can all take away from Star Wars Rebels, is that it's fun. It might not be the same type of story you would get in a feature film. It's a little bit different than the Clone Wars in a lot of respects, even though there are a lot of similarities to it. But at the end of the day, I always looked forward to the show, because in a lot of ways it was just a fun, way to express Star Wars, and I think that's what I appreciated about it the most. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, it had some downfalls, a lot of them, but along the way, but really picked itself up at the end, and I'm happy it was here. That was my thing. I was really sad to see it go. Absolutely. Well, Brad, as always, it's been a pleasure. If subscribers would like to learn more about you and the Jurassic Park podcast, what are some places that they can go check out? Oh, man, I am in too many places. My personal Twitter, at Brad Jost, podcast, at Jurassic Park Pod, JurassicParkPodcast.com. I got a new project starting up pretty soon, so keep an eye out on my Twitter for that. It'll be pretty interesting if you're into theme parks and stuff like that, so that's a little hint, but that'll be fun. But yeah, just search me out there. Very cool. So thank you again so much for taking the time to coming on to join me today and discuss Star Wars Rebels. Here's looking forward to the next Disney Star Wars animated series. Yeah, anything Star Wars, let me know. I'll come chat about it. I love it. Awesome. All right, my friends, that'll do it for the 22nd episode of Cantina Chatter. Once again, I'd like to thank Brad Jost for taking the time to chat about Star Wars Rebels. It's been such a fun show to follow, and I eagerly look forward to the next chapter in Star Wars animated television series. Be sure to hit up Brad by visiting the Jurassic Park Podcast online. I'll throw some links into the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please spread the word. And if you're so inclined, we greatly appreciate your 5-star reviews on iTunes or positive reviews wherever you're listening to the podcast. They certainly help Cantina Chatter's rankings and visibility. Be sure to subscribe to the Victorious Cantina YouTube channel and follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. As always, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to the Cantina Chatter Podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.